my website, and just show you a couple of the links that we've added since then. And let's see, that is the this one here. FEMA's got a community rating system now for floodplain management. Found this, um, and now, of course, the status of the National Flood Insurance Program, real question mark, in my opinion. We'll know later after June through October what the feds are going to be doing on this. But as it stands now, this is the a program where you can see some flood insurance premium rate discounts for flood risk. And this is the program for public information in order to get credit under those community rating systems. So nice set of information here, especially if you're a local emergency manager who has additional floodplain management responsibilities in your jurisdiction. Hopefully that's something you're aware of. I put in this thing about the Suntory Group, which is at one time a Japanese brewing company. I believe they own a bunch of American companies now too. Some beer companies that you probably would recognize the names. But I put this in here because not as an endorsement to them, but because one of the things that they look at is a sustainable water philosophy. And it was kind of interesting to see some of the initiatives they do in different countries where they do business and where they have plants and things like that. So I thought that was good. Found out that there was a harmful algae bloom in Southern California coast this year. So that's a fairly new story that just happened a couple of weeks ago, I guess, is the way to look at it, where it was affecting marine life significantly. So that story's there. Below this inland operations field guide, which has been around for a while, I have a couple other ones. This ArcGIS story I thought was really good. So MITSE's New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection had a climate resilience policy intern named Maham Khurshid, who in 2024 put together this ArcGIS story, which is pretty cool. These ArcGIS stories are nice because they're a combination of videos, pictures, and maps. And as the story's being built, the maps are live data, so they can sort of talk about things while they're actually happening. Now, this was done in 2024 when Ida was 2021, so it's a little bit past that. But basically, this is our favorite, my favorite at least, center of disaster in the state of New Jersey when it comes to flooding. And this was during Hurricane Ida. This same picture probably could have been shot during Irene, because I know I was there. There's a shelter at the American Legion Hall a block away from the high school there, that as most of the center of Manville becomes, it becomes an island. And there was a fire, an explosion. It talks about that. But basically, you can start scrolling down on these and you get these story maps. And so this talks about where Manville is in the state of New Jersey, in Somerset County. And then it goes into, the town and some basic stuff about it. Location between, guess what? Two different rivers, Raritan and Millstone, which makes it a challenge. And you can see this is starting to render. And you can zoom into little areas, specifics, where you live, where the Walmart is, where the low areas are, that sort of thing is a good stuff. Here's that history. Here's some of those floodings I mentioned before. So they got hit with Floyd. They got hit with Irene in 2011. This is there's a video of this truck from the some National Guard unit. I don't know which one. Trying to do the high water vehicle thing, but not quite making it, basically, is the end of the day. And I think I know where that's probably near the underpass on the way towards Griggstown area, and the airport on that part of Manville. Then there was Ida. So this is where they had a ton of rain, as you can see, the flooding that was involved. There's a shot of the one of the state police helicopters And again, more flooding and some people in boats. And then here's President Biden at the time in 2021 coming to visit Manville, which he did. Prior storm, I know Governor Christie was in Manville for Irene. I don't know about Floyd or any of the others, but this hit national level of attention for it. And then here's that gas explosion and fire that was in the same home. Oh, wow! In the previous photo, I did not know that. I just reading that now. That home in this previous photo here. Oh, this is the home that exploded. Gotcha. That same one that he visited. I was going to say that he blew up after it. No, it had already had the explosion when he toured it. I guess the floodwaters had receded to that point. You can see the difference or the similar type picture. And there's some video, and this has the live video. I'm not going to go through this. And so just some public constraints, data, information, public stuff to talk about, evacuation challenges, and so forth. It just keeps going. And you can see they've also got disaster risk areas, priority cluster areas, public. This is how you can quickly sort of tab or bookmark your way through the different presentation. But if you're scrolling down through it, it effectively goes through the whole thing. So I just thought that was pretty cool. And I'm including the link here in the Waterbook website page. The last thing on here is something that came from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA's National Centers for the Environmental Information. Hopefully this is going to work. But this is a visualization of the frequency and cost of billion-dollar weather and climate events. And this is their wording, by the way, using interactive time series. So again, a good one to look and see some of that historical data. So, definitely New Jersey's in here, but if you're looking at a number of different FIRA and SPR type significant natural threats, these are them. And as you can tell, a number of these are water related. So that is the, and here's your billion-dollar event over time, going back to 1980s. It's a good 45 years of 44, whatever, of history, and to see how it's done, and then you can sort and organize it. It's a nice little graphic, and then the statistics are there, and that's that. So, okay, so on to the book. We are talking about the module is lecture number 11, I believe. So the Zoom recording for last week is up. Lecture 11 is earthquakes and tsunamis. We're in the home stretch. This is the next to last module of the course in terms of matching up with the book, as I mentioned. And then the thing about this is for chapter 15, which we'll cover in a second, it's a land-based threat, right? An earthquake, it's made out of land, earthquake. But generally speaking, that is and we're in the cascading complex, section of the book. So that's when they happen in the ocean, they generate tsunamis. And that's really the way a tsunami is generated, by an earthquake. So it's kind of not that we're covering why earthquakes happen. It's just the idea that it's a domino that sets off, another domino, and that domino is a tsunami. And that's the key to it. And these are going to be major emergency management actions, and as you'll see in the phases, and these are no notice events, right? So this is unlike a tropical storm or a cyclone or a hurricane. You get a lot of notice of when that's coming, and even I would consider in some cases wildfires to be notice incidents, not water related, obviously. But when you look at drought, there's that possibility of exasperating the wildfire. But both of those are notice events. Earthquakes are not. So it's as simple as that. And the tsunami that follows, can be happening very quickly. It's not like it happens days or weeks later. It's hours or even minutes later that occurs. So that is our notice and information here, we'll switch over to the book at this point. Switch. All right, so we're at earthquakes and tsunamis. And again, it's the ocean floor where these earthquakes happen. Effectively, you get sea floor uplifted and down dropped. So it's like a bounce where the floor of the sea is lifting up and then pushing back down. That creates that wave action, that water column going up and down, and that energy is then transferred to the horizontal, meaning it starts to move this wave across the ocean on the surface, and then it basically just keeps going until it hits land and even further into that. These are different than tsunamis are different than tidal waves, and there are and when I published the book, there were at least 5 countries that had tsunami early warning systems to them. And the footnotes there under number 4, if you want to see that. You can find a lot of stuff on books and peer-reviewed articles about tsunamis and earthquakes. I'm not going to claim, as I have for similarly to all the other chapters, especially about meteorology stuff. I'm not an expert on this, but basically I'm trying to bring together some stuff that's important for emergency managers to know. Again, as I said, this is the maximum of a no-notice type water complex incident. This is as big as it's going to get. This is the stuff the movies, right, they film about. So if you can figure out how to plan for, organize, equip, train, and exercise for a tsunami, you're going to hit a lot of the other stuff that's not as bad, the tidal waves and other things. They're still bad, don't get me wrong, but the tsunami is the worst of the worst. So we can't stop them, but we can prevent the adverse impacts to other humans from them. And it's the West Coast, including Alaska and their Aleutian Islands, where there is a significant impact or threat to the tsunamis side. That is because there's 2 major subduction zones near populated coastlines. So those are where the earthquakes could be. Think of them as in fault lines is another way to look at it. But the subduction zones, one of the biggest ones is called Cascadia, which I'll talk about in a second. These are kind of an interesting thing. They exist everywhere. There are certainly fault lines on the East Coast as well too. But those 2 over in California, everybody, well, not everybody, here's, as you can see, a conflict on risk calculations. A good number of people are concerned that an earthquake in California is not a question of if, but a question of when. So that is something that they plan for on a regular basis and consistently across multiple states, not just California. But here's that Cascadia subduction zone. And if you are familiar, there, every year in October they do a great shakeout. That is basically to get the whole country to be thinking about, the idea of an earthquake. This can happen anywhere in terms of earthquakes, but the idea of the mega quake sending a tsunami wave 30 feet or more over communities, the odds of that, according to this one statistic I found, or the source I should say I found, is 1 in 6. That's a big deal. And in part of Washington State's Olympic Peninsula, they estimate that wave could reach 100 feet and put the tribal nation land there 45 feet underwater. And Washington State's emergency management estimates there's about 90,000 people in that zone, another 86,000 in water maze that would be harder to reach to. And that's in addition to the almost 250,000 sightseers and other visitors that are there in the summertime. So that, this could be, wow, 60,000 people could be about 28% could be crushed or swept out to sea. Not very positive news. So there's a real question about this. I think it's been interesting to see that when you look at national reports in the last couple of years on overall threats to the nation, from cyber, from rogue nation states, you name it, whatever it is, including hurricanes. Surprisingly, this Cascadia one is not at the federal level. It doesn't show that, and there are conflicts as to where this is, and I don't anticipate those conflicts are going to get any better anytime soon. With what the states think of this as a threat versus what the feds think of this as a threat. Here's your information about a subduction zone, sort of a definition for it, and some science in the background behind it. Case examples, as I mentioned already, the subduction zone in Cascadia, which runs from Northern California all the way up through parts of Canada and the British Columbia, is about 70 to 100 miles offshore from the Pacific coastline. And there's already been 43 earthquakes in the last 10,000 years. And the last time it happened was said the 1700, and that was a 9.0. So you can imagine that the feeling that they're due is part of this. Oregon is a concern, and so forth. And as I mentioned, that whole community efforts, starting with Region 10 of FEMA, is part of that great shakeout that happens every year in October. Next up is an Indian Ocean Indonesian tsunami of 2004. This is one that certainly made the news back in 2004. It was a massive 9.1 magnitude earthquake, which generated a tsunami in the Indian Ocean off of the coast of Sumatra, which is one of those Indonesian isles. And you can see here that it went all the way, the shaking from that earthquake went all the way through to India, Singapore, Sri Lanka, Thailand, a number of East Asian countries. And then the tsunami was quite large. In part of Indonesia, it reached 167 feet or 51 meters. And it went flooded inland 3 miles inward. So that's a lot of water going into places where there's not necessarily water. And then there were a number of coastal level observation stations in the Atlantic and the Pacific, which is where this tsunami kept rippling through multiple oceans, basically making it global. So there's some more information here about that. And from that 2004 storm, about almost 2 million people were displaced, and 167,000 people lost their lives in Indonesia from that tsunami. And there's videos of it, I think, and certainly the after impact was quite significant, and in a global nonprofit support, as well as United Nations type support for it as well too. 2011 saw a great East Japanese earthquake, and that one will be familiar to most when we think about the fact that that earthquake then caused a tsunami. The tsunami then hit a nuclear power plant. So this is Fukushima. So that's what happened there. And the core meltdown and hydrogen explosions. There's a lot of books and articles on that. I have some recommendations of what to read at the end, I believe. If not, I know a couple authors that have done a lot of extensive work on it, one in particular. And then this was a major event, obviously, in Japan and the world. The radioactive fish and debris and ocean water made its way all the way over to California from this earthquake in 2011. And then in Alaska, they, as I mentioned before, they also have tsunami risk, and near the port city of Valdez, you can see some stuff here about that mentions their their mapping and their concerns about it. They are looking closely at this and noting that it has had past history. 1946, they had a tsunami from an earthquake that destroyed a lighthouse in an island there. And in 1964, which is the largest recorded in North America, 9.2, that tsunami in Valdez saw 27-foot wave, a water height, and 128 people were killed from that. So there's information about that is here as well too. And then those are kind of the cases that the big ones that we're familiar with. That Indonesian one is certainly the one with the largest lives lost, and then the Fukushima had humongous, massive, long-standing, cascading disasters with the nuclear power plant. But there are still impacts historically to the U.S. Directly, as noted, in these Alaskan case examples. So when it comes to the adverse impacts of the emergency and recovery support functions, as well as the community lifelines, you can imagine that debris removal, bridge repair, etc., from these incidents where tons of debris and things are being moved as water, fast water, high water moves inland, taking out buildings and cars and all that, is a massive road impact for transportation. I mentioned clearing space for helicopter landing areas is a good start to restoring this emergency support function, because that's going to be how you're going to be able to get people in, support in, medical services in, and bringing people out that are injured and so forth, is probably going to be via helicopter in many, and that's what was done in a lot of these other countries when they had their tsunamis. And then those cell towers are going to get knocked out as part of that debris moving through as well too. So creating communications systems capability like cell on wheels devices are going to be important. Prioritizing the first responder cellular voice and network capability above the commercial one. The public works and engineering, as this water is from a tsunami is coming in, it's probably destroying water treatment plants that are in its way, or pumping stations, whatever it is. We're going to need a lot of help from a lot of different groups, including National Guard units for maybe transporting potable water, Army Corps of Engineers, all of that together. You saw for the video that I showed you the story, I should say, from Manville during Ida. Now that was a tropical storm, not a tsunami, of course. That fires can be generated the same way that the slosh and the wave action from a tropical storm can move propane tanks off their thing and dislodge gas connections and so forth. A tsunami would do the same thing, except on a much more massive scale. So there can be fires and things like that generated from a tsunami, effectively by just the infrastructure being damaged to the point where electrical lines get catch things on fire, and of course the gas lines exploding, things like that. The information and planning, ESF 5, this one is somewhat critical in the sense that what kind of understanding of what capabilities, what we're doing, where, and all that can be a massive amount of data coming in to the planning section. So understanding what that is and where it's going and what needs to be done, what resources are available, lots of things all happening at once very quickly. And then, of course, mass care, you've got sheltering needs, feeding needs, all of that may be isolated to points. People are moving to higher ground, and that may not be where the shelter is, but that's going to be where the shelter is going to be. So there's a lot of that going on as well, too. Tsunamis have a huge logistics logistics impact. Staging areas outside the zone are critical. You might have flooded or damaged railways, right? Roadways and airports, the whole thing, because of this water that's coming where it hadn't been before, or bringing in debris and damage to areas, impacting the supply chain integrity, and potentially the security for it too. As we mentioned in all the other chapters, public health and medical services are an impact ESF 8 for every disaster, and tsunami should be declared a public health emergency right away. That opens up the same types of things for the tropical storms last week that we talked about, and then you have stormwater hazards, deadly mold, the same kinds of things can happen. Sewage backups if you've got damaged systems, and then hospitals if they're not directly impacted by the water from the tsunami wave. They may still have injuries and folks coming in, and they may have issues for much longer than just the wave and the receding water afterwards. They'll be overwhelmed and they'll need support from other hospitals and hospital systems outside of their impacted geography. Search and rescue, again, after the fact, because you're not going to be doing, there's no swiftwater rescue in a tsunami wave. So that makes it different than a hurricane in many parts of the area that's impacted. But the idea that there may be a lot of recovery operations. Think about the scenario in the incident, the case example for Indonesia with 160,000 plus deceased. That is a massive effort on ESF 9. And then for 10, again, as we've talked before, where there's tsunami flooding damage to industrial or other areas, or oil or hazardous materials, they can make their way into the streams and watershed. There's community impacts for that. There may be cleanup work that has to be done right away. Sewage treatment plant overflows, all kinds of fun stuff for ESF 10. 11, this can be issues because of the environmental impacts to marshlands, estuaries, and aquatic life, similarly what we saw in the tropical storm chapter 14. The other thing about this is, as the water is moving miles and miles inland, it may be hitting farmland. So you've got now saltwater inundation into areas that the agriculture, the plants can't handle it, and then they're impacted for long period of time. The ground is contaminated effectively with salt, and may make it very difficult to grow things there. And then energy, as we mentioned from the Fukushima, the Great East Japan earthquake of 2011, kind of its official name. You'll see that had impact on power generation, electric production and distribution. Imagine a tsunami wave coming up the Delaware River. There'd be a couple of potential nuclear power plant issues there, or something on any of the sort of areas where we keep our infrastructure for power generation. Think about a 40 or 50 foot wave with all those wind turbines that are offshore, right? They'd be underwater and most likely knocked down. So that's a huge energy pull for ESF 12. Of course, public safety and security, ESF 13, has massive impacts as well, as it did in chapter 14, and you can read those here. Cross-sector business and infrastructure, number 14. This is going to impact large geographical areas of any jurisdiction. That'll include, of course, business, non-governmental organizations, and other infrastructure. Concerns for banking, oil, all of the sort of things. So stabilizing these community lifelines is part of it, and that is tied to the ESFs and the RSFs as well too. And then, of course, with external affairs, there are definitely preparedness messaging about this. If you see, you'll find a lot of this over there in Oregon, on the West Coast, Oregon, California, and Washington State as examples. There's not a season for these because, again, there are no notice, and there's not a tropical storm season like the quote unquote June through November for Atlantic hurricane season. There's all year round is a season for earthquakes and tsunamis. But basically, that what gets turned on quickly, run from the water, hide from the wind, is the same concept here. So that is the run from the water is getting far up you can from areas. So if you find yourself in an area where you see signs for tsunami warnings, whether you're traveling internationally or you happen to be over in Oregon or Washington State or parts of California, keep track of that. Figure out, what would you do? How would you get to higher ground should that come about? Have those alert systems linked together, whether you're using apps or on your smartphone or whatever. But be prepared to do that, because they're really not able to rescue people, from houses that are, going to be flooded from a tsunami wave in the zone. It doesn't work that way. You got to get to higher ground. On the recovery support functions, certainly those tsunamis that make landfall are going to have a huge economic impact across any community. So future incident mitigation preparedness hopefully will be around if that were to happen, but economic recovery will most likely be slow or non-existent. Health and social services, similarly to what was in the ESF 6 and 8, there can be significant impacts if you get harmed by the tsunami, break a leg, flooding, mold damage to your home afterwards, pulmonary issues, compromised immune systems, etc. All those types of things may not be direct injuries from the wave itself, but they are still things that will come about from this incident, and there may not be resources, capabilities for people with disabilities, capabilities for community residential services and non-residential services like drug treatment. All kinds of things may be curtailed if they were adversely impacted, and if resources are being stretched thin, and staff is being diverted from one role to another. This is where, unfortunately, health and social services sometimes takes a second seat to other actions the government feels it needs to do. And then community assistance, that sense of equitable recovery is going to be something to look for in recovery support functions. You can look at those case histories in the other countries and see what they attempted to do. How do you rebuild farming? How do where's the priority of infrastructure and urban areas versus suburban and rural areas? Lots of things to consider, and how that gets set up is an interesting question. And then infrastructure, as I just mentioned a second ago, where does that get prioritized? You're going to need help from both private and public sector organizations, most likely, for this, across all the different things, whether it's water system, electric systems, etc. These are questions that have to be dealt with as a community. So having transparency and collaboration and coordination and knowing what kind of decisions have to be made and tough choices need to be made. Doing those in exercises and things where everybody's in the room, not understanding it, that helps a lot when it comes down to actually doing it. I know, as I said last week in New Jersey, we had times where we had to make tough calls. Historically or in exercises, it's a lot easier to then, when everybody's in the room and everybody's understanding the impacts, to make those decisions, via unified command, when you have to make the either or decisions. Either the water treatment plant or the hospital, I think, is the example that I remember from Sandy. The housing obviously is going to be an impact, and a massive one. Typically, the areas that are in these communities are have a lot of housing to them, right? Everybody wants to live by the coast, and that also includes our territories and our tribal nations, where the water is effectively economic and other life-sustaining benefits. So you're closer to the water on a day-to-day basis, but you're also then closer to the threat from a tsunami. So the housing will need to be replaced, and where it gets replaced has always been a challenge during any of these disasters. From this book and any other book about fire or earthquakes or air incidents or any others, housing is going to be a challenge. And then again, how this gets impacted to recreational and the economics of the boating and the fishing and any kind of parks and other aspects of a community that are near the water or even inland, as I said, with a tsunami. How those get damaged, how schools get damaged, things like that are things to consider from a tsunami. And then here's your community lifelines. Again, noting that safety and security is going to be impacted because you have to not only protect the people that are in the areas where there are damage, but you might also have to protect infrastructure so that there aren't other attacks, other that restoration is done, safely by workers. That sort of thing is one of those things for safety and security community lifeline. Food, hydration, shelter, these may be issues related to the logistics challenge. Chances are tsunami is going to impact the water systems as well. People will not be able to return to their damaged homes for months, if not years. In the case of Fukushima, there is whole areas that are uninhabitable around that nuclear power plant, still to this day. And then health and medical is, of course, similar to the ESF 8 information. Energy is similar to the ESF 12. Communications to the ESF 2. You can see how this goes. The community lifelines and the ESFs tend to run kind of parallel, but they're brought together to kind of collaborative and coordinated in a little bit more than just the single use systems. The transportation aspects, as we mentioned, the tsunamis are going to have a catastrophic impact on this. And I talked about that before when the impacts to ESF 1. And then same for the hazardous materials, as this giant wave is going to breach seawalls and create other hazards as it hits industrial areas. And then finally, knowing and understanding how this flooding conditions can impact potable water systems is critical for emergency management. Is it a temporary thing? Is it something that their parts can be brought in to fix quickly? How is the rest of the infrastructure? You fix the water treatment plant, but all the pumping stations for the in a 20-mile radius are all damaged. Those are the things to be concerned with. Plus in the case of an earthquake plus tsunami, are there or aftershocks? Are there additional ripples of the earthquake that are impacting your underground systems as well too, as an example? So there's a lot of things involved in this and that's why it's cascading and why it's complex. So here's your cycles. So again, I think it's important to be prepared for these. There's not really an ability to protect your homes from a tsunami, unlike elevation, 3 or 4 feet from sea level rise plus slosh or moms or meows. When you're talking about a wave that's 100 feet high, you really can't build a home up that high, and so it's not going to happen. And it's not like you're living on the 12th floor of a building is going to help either. Again, the stuff of movies. The response effort is going to have to be a lot of post-landfall support, especially in areas that are not devastated by the tsunami. So you go near, but not to the point of impact. And then recovery levels, again, this is going to be managed at the state and territorial and tribal nations for sure. And that may be a little bit higher level than just the local level. These kinds of incidents are going to usually affect more than a single jurisdiction, a single municipality. This hopefully would reach a presidential declared status. I think the jury ask me again in December if that what I think about this answer. As I wrote this book before changes have been made to the FEMA and some other things happening at the federal level. So again, typically you're on your own, and flood insurance and other things may help cover this. This is going to be one of those, right, where your State Farm or your Allstates or whatever insurance companies that you have are going to call this flooding if you're, and that's how it's not going to be a hazard covered by them from a tsunami. So things to consider. And then mitigation plans, that's subduction zone threat and the hazard risk analysis may be something to look at. Let me see what I wrote for 48 as the link. So this is a South Dakota, Cape Flattery. They created they have a school district and their hazard mitigation plan. I believe it had a tsunami risk in here. That's probably why I included it. So if you want to look at this, this is maybe a good example of how this school district created a hazard mitigation plan. I guess they are a part of Washington State. That is what I would guess, because it says Washington Emergency Management Division. So something to look at if you're interested in seeing an example of one of these hazard mitigation plans that includes an earthquake / tsunami threat, and of course the hazards. So next up is let's see where I'm at. I just wanted to go back. So we covered, okay, yeah, that was mitigation. And then adverse impacts to the incident command system. Again, you're suddenly hit. You may not have enough time. There may be issues, concerns about sending workforce out into this. You don't want to be doing that. Safety officers need to be looking at their teams and holding them back from doing search and rescue and swift water type things, as I mentioned before. PIOs have to get that message out. They have to be very clear about it. It's very similar to the tropical storm stuff, but just urgently and quickly, and again, oversaturate the message on that. Because some of those areas may stay flooded after the water has come in and then come back out again or receded. Liaison officers, you may have lots of it, just like we did in the tropical storm section. This is very similar to that. And then, as I mentioned before, knowing what that underwater hazards and other information is critical for this. And there's a lot of things that may be now covered in water, and that sort of same underwater now hazards and things similar to what we talked about in chapters 14 and 13 are there as well too. And then I don't know why this should not say tropical storm, this should say tsunami. So my apologies on that. But basically there are you're not going to have enough preparedness. You're not going to have enough finance and administrative support for this because it's not something people are budgeting for. I'm pretty sure of that. Let's see. This is still topical storm. Generally supporting a tsunami logistically is beyond the capabilities of local jurisdictions. So just wherever you see tropical storm, substitute tsunami for that. I got to check the regular book and see if this is an error on my part, which it probably is. And then again, nothing for the planning section if the planners have already planned for a tsunami. So here's your poetic stuff. And this is a similar tropical storm section again. I got to look at this, but I think you can see how this is being ready for a tsunami matches up with the ESFs and the RSFs in terms of your exercises and your equipment and how you're staffed. Very similar. That again, that concern that now you have salt water where it wasn't is one of the biggest differentials between this type of threat and just regular river flooding or a dam breach of potable or drinking water or fresh water. Some differences there. Here's our notes. And then, as I mentioned, one of the key readings I would recommend is Daniel Aldridge's book or any of his articles. His book, Building Resilience, Social Capital in Post-Disaster Recovery, is all about Fukushima. And so it's a really good book about how the community kind of came together there. There are some other books about those other disasters that I mentioned. Here's the information about the Indian Ocean tsunami. Here's a piece on the Port Valdez, Alaska information, etc. So there's a lot here, including some Cascadia stuff that's really good, as well as tabletop exercises. So any of these you're welcome to borrow and utilize in your own jurisdictions if they're available. Here's a bibliography section that matches up with the footnotes, as it does with every other chapter. So that's where I got my sourcings from. So any questions about tsunamis and earthquakes? Okay. So as I said before, let's see, let me go back over here and share. So what we're up to now is, as I said, week 12. Next week, we're going to cover water treatment plants, saltwater intrusion, ice dams and frozen lakes. That's chapters 16, 17, and 18. They're fairly short chapters. They just have very different types of things to them. Then we'll do a quiz, or at least set up the timing for the quiz as we've done before. Again, this is the last one of the section or part quizzes that we have. And then weeks 13, 14, and 15 are sort of finalizing this process, answering questions, etc. But they're also a point where, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this course, we have an opportunity, if you want, optionally, again, not something you have to do, but if you guys want, guys and gals, want to look at creating a paper on a topic that's water related of some kind, that would help certainly to match up with the course in the book, and or you want to work together on creating a short presentation. Both of those I can help with. And as I mentioned before on the final team presentation part, one of the things that would be beneficial, or at least we can submit it. I can't promise you that it'll be accepted, but I'm got a pretty good in with a few of the folks, right? That we do this as you could do this as a presentation at one of the NJEMA meetings, and then that would most likely count towards your certification or recertification professional achievements or professional activities, I think they're called. I know for the CEM and the AEM, the International Association of Emergency Managers, Certified Emergency Manager, and the Associate Emergency Manager criteria, this is one of the things, both a published paper in an independent journal, and I would help you craft that paper to be submitted. Again, I can't make a promise that it would be actually published, but they really, this one journal that I've worked with really loves to get pieces, articles from practitioners. They're not interested in the academic stuff. So this is a really simple paper It's basically written in regular English, not any kind of academic talk or anything like that. And it is with hyperlinks rather than official footnotes that are like the kinds that I write in half the stuff I do that are, as you can see, are crazy amounts of referencing and things like that. They are looking for factual stuff, of course, in both of these, not really opinion, so to speak, but the topics for both, I think, have applicability to local emergency managers, and I think that's what's key. They're not talking about changing national policy or figuring out which state is better than the other, kind of a thing. It's you know, how do I help solve a problem for a local emergency manager? Is the case for both of these. So this final paper, as an example, if you're interested in doing it, just drop me a line or send me something on Telegram or whatever it is that you're interested in doing it, and I'll help you, help craft it and stuff like that. And if you want, we can also work on it in class. But I don't want to put anybody on the spot, and embarrass anybody or things like that. But the idea is that you've seen from our class, right? We bring a lot of other experience and other information, other intelligence that could certainly help. And I think that might be fun to work on as sort of a group thing. And that's kind of what I've allocated part of the time in week 13 or 14 for that. Not the next class, but the one after that, or the one after that. So sometime in May, in other words. The papers, for them to be turned into an article, they should run about 1,200 to 1,500 words tops. If you use Microsoft Word, I mean, you can see a word count at the bottom. I don't know if Google Docs does that or not. It doesn't matter which application you use. Those are the two most common. It certainly, if you're using something else, like what was the other one? WinPerfect? Kind of can't remember the other packages out there in the old days. WordPerfect. Sorry, that was it. It was one software called WordPerfect. I don't know if anybody's still using that or not. But anyway, if you do 1-inch margin around, 12-point font, in Times Roman, it's simple stuff. It's not a lot of things. And as I said too, any kind of reference, you do it in a hyperlink like that. You're not doing large direct quotes. You're summarizing the information. Maybe a direct quote, that's short. But if that's the case, you just cite who it is, or, and with a hyperlink and a page number or something like that. If you're doing a direct quote, I'll help you with that. Not a problem. What's really kind of important is you cannot use artificial intelligence for the writing. I am officially saying that. I don't have a way of checking it, but they might. The editors might. I write everything by hand, as best I can. Although I'm starting to use Microsoft's Copilot for a few things, but I tend to put a footnote or a parentheses, assisted with Copilot or something like that, where it comes out. On some of the more recent larger work that I've done, I've put that in, and I've also put it in boxes and things like that, so that it's obvious that I didn't write this, kind of a thing. I don't want to take credit for something that somebody else wrote, including some computer somewhere. I think is the way to look at it. And of course, don't include any kind of proprietary, confidential, or for information, for official use only. That's what FOUO means. Don't put anything non-public or link to something on your own intranet or something that people can't get to, obviously. Those are things. As I said, it helps to write on something or something you want to learn more about. And then, of course, is something of interest to your fellow emergency managers. I would prefer it to be something about water related, because that kind of makes it interesting. I'm happy to include whatever gets published in the future versions of this course. I think that would be cool too. If you want to look at these links here, and as you see, this was in the final paper thing, which was a link from the course module that we had. Here's 3 articles. Water and wastewater sector perspectives. This is an example of how it's written. So this was done in 2023. This is the journal I'm talking about, Domestic Preparedness. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. It's a free online journal. It doesn't cost you anything to click on them or get their monthly emails and all that kind of stuff. Good stuff in here, I think. But you can see how it's written. So cybersecurity information, here's the hyperlink, here's some information, they do quotes, and you can see how this is written. It's really simple. And as you can see, I'm going to scroll down quickly. It's all about water systems. So it's a good one. And it's not that long. This one's actually a little bit long, but not much to it. I've seen much shorter ones than this one, but this is about the size and length. Not a lot of images or anything like that per se, but you can throw in a couple if you want. Let's see. Let me go to the next one. Water resistance. So here's water resistance, water sector resilience and redundancy. So you can always use their search box too. If you want to do, water threats, you can do that. And, you can put quotes in and all that kind of stuff. The search takes a couple seconds. It's not there's a lot of articles out there. So it takes a minute sometimes to pull things up, but this gives you the idea. So here's that water and wastewater. Here's water as a lifeline, disaster, right? So a lot of water stuff. You don't have to. I'm not saying pick one of these and try to do an update, but you can also look first and see if there's anything that was already written about it, and you can of course reference something else. Just cite it, as I said, or link to it. As Bieber and Kellen said in 2016, blah 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 blah. There's easy ways to do that, and I will help you with that if this is something you want to do. Again, optional, not anything everybody has to do. But again, could be fun, and I'm happy to help. Just to give you an idea, that's what the water was. Let me see. No. Sorry, just waiting for this to come up. So here's an article. Michael Etzel, who works for New York State's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, had an idea. He said, I'd like to write an article about gamification for public health. I could use some help. I said, sure, I'll help you out. So he wrote most of this. I threw a couple of things in I knew, kind of a thing. So that's how this work turns out, So I've written about 11 or 12, I think, articles, or co-authored, I should say. I've written about 8 or 9, and I think I co-authored 2 or 3 others. 3, I believe, with other people. So I've got a track record with this editor. I understand how it gets written. So I like I said, pretty good chance it'll get published. And then since they're an independent editor and they go through a kind of not a full peer review process, but they do have experts, some of them who may actually be people in this class. I don't know. It's an unknown who it is. I don't think it's double blind, but it's definitely single blind. I don't know who the reviewers are, but they do look things over to see relevance to emergency management and factual checks and whatever else it is. So I've had comments come back on articles I've written, a few of them, but I'm also always welcome for that kind of input too. So it takes about 3 months or so to run through this. It's a fairly quick process, I got to tell you. I've been through a couple other journals where it's years for the editorial or whatever process to go through. I am literally I sent one in October. I don't remember I think it was October of 2015 four? No, I might have even been earlier than that. I got to look it up. Um, uh, and and it's been at least it's been more than 6 months since that thing. It's been, I think, a year and 6 months. I have to look and see. It's frustrating because the world has changed in that period of time between that. So I throw that out there. This is a pretty quick turnaround on getting articles published. They're pretty good about that. And then the other thing about this, that was the final paper that, again, optionally, you're welcome to do. Similarly, that final team presentation, um, you know, you can look at, we're talking about like a 10-minute presentation. Um, PowerPoint kind of a thing, and you could have up to 5 people do it. I don't care how many people want to do it together. You know, whatever works, for that. And I think, I think the New Jersey CEM Commission, I haven't talked to Joe or any of the folks specifically about, are there maximum number of people who could do this and all that. I think we'll figure it out and it'll work out okay. But these are some of the ideas you could do something on the whole acronyms that I had in chapter 2. You could look at a threat and go through what are the finance, logistics, operations planning, and intelligence impacts. That would, 3 people could do that and alternate back and forth between who does the introduction, who does the F, who does the L, the O, whatever you want to do, kind of a thing. It's pretty open-ended. I think something like that would be pretty good. I remember seeing a couple meetings ago, somebody did one on like the CERT program, introducing it, how they, covered it. That was a presentation at one of the NJE EMA meetings. You could do the same thing about swiftwater rescue in your community, how it works, who's part of it, whatever you want to do. And again, it can be 2 people, it could be 1 person, whatever wants to do this. I'm open to, again, helping you build out the slides and crafting it so that it becomes something. And I think this, again, from a group perspective, we could be your first practice audience on giving that presentation. I'll turn the screens and share the Zoom over to you, and you can run it, or I can run your slides, however you want to do it. That is totally fine. So think about that between now and next week. And again, drop me one of those Telegram things or an email or put something, wherever you want to do. Call me if you want. If you're interested in doing this, I'm happy to look through that. And either one or both, whatever you feel comfortable for. I think what's fun about it, again, is you get the credit, but I think also, you'll see, I think we'd all help you, kind of a thing. So there's that. And as I mentioned before, these kinds of things, you can kind of state your opinion to some extent, but again, backing it up with facts. I think this is really where there's power in what people, practitioners really do, and how they can lead. That's really what we're showing here on this. You get that full picture, and if you can explain it to other people, hopefully you can convince them to help. So. Any other questions? I think that's kind of all I had for this week.